Hi everyone, my name is Posada and I'm a teacher. So today I'm going to focus on, sorry about that, there we go, on climate change education at a sustainable public school in Uruguay. So this is an attempt to tackle climate change through education. We've seen different versions of it by now, and this is the one that I'm interested in because as we know, climate change is not a scientific problem, but rather it's a social and political one, which is partly what Erin was talking about today. And I believe we have to redirect our teaching and learning methods in order to tackle the climate emergency. And that is why I conducted this case study in Uruguay. So this public school, it's a 270 square meter building, and it's located in a small coastal town called Jauregui, which is hard to pronounce. And it was built in only 7 weeks, and it is made up of approximately 60% of recycled materials. So it's like 20 tons of waste, like plastic and glass bottles, cans, tires, cardboard, etc. It is more traditionally known as earthship, this type of building. And it involved 150 people in its construction, and it was led by an NGO in Uruguay called TAGMA, and they hired Michael Reynolds, who is a well-known architect in this type of buildings. So personally, I visited the school in 2017 and I was hooked, and I'll show you a short video of the school and you might see why. There we go. Give me a sec. Yep.
People depends on a lot of systems that are not sustainable, that can collapse really quickly. They've been collapsing and they will collapse again. So think outside of the box.
When you're a kid, you're kind of impacted by your teachers, your friends, your family, and your environment. And just the idea of being able to teach a kid through this sort of school puts, I think, their mentality on a different level, where in a sense they're not only thinking about themselves anymore, but they have to think of the building and the impact that it has in their community.
It's teaching people just like you teach them reading, writing, and arithmetic. Teach them the logic of the planet, and we'll start bringing people into the world that understand the world. Not the world of economics, not the world of politics, but the world of the planet, of the earth.
Okay, so this was shot during the construction of the school. The last person actually who spoke there is Michael Reynolds. So now I'll talk a bit about the building itself. Here you have a sort of diagram that explains some of the systems that are in place. In addition to being self-sufficient in terms of energy production, it also you can produce organic food. It uses rainwater in the sinks, in the toilets, as well as for irrigation of the vegetable garden. The school also counts with black water treatments and an external wet zone. And to the south, the school is enclosed by a thick retaining wall, which basically increases the thermal mass. And in that wall, there are pipes that are inserted and they generate a cross-air ventilation. And that means that in the classrooms, the temperature is always between 18 to 22 Celsius, regardless of the weather outside. So in terms of context, this is a primary school, and it hosts approximately 80 students from a lower middle socioeconomic background. It has a very small educational team. It consists of the head teacher, 2 primary school teachers, and 1 preschool teacher. And it has support from an expert in agroecology and organic plants, which I call vegetable garden expert in my dissertation, and TAGMA, the NGO I mentioned before, who was responsible for actually building the school. So given all this context, my question as a teacher is how does education occur in a building like this? But more importantly, how does the community respond to this type of school project. It is important to mention that the community did not ask for this school, and it was decided by the authorities that it will be built in that specific community. They did ask for a public school, but just not one of the most famous ones in Latin America. So in order to get to their reaction and interpretations, what I did was conduct 17 semi-structured online interviews with different participants from the school, different actors. So the educational team, parents, students, and I also interviewed a few education experts in order to contextualize the school and what I call climate change education. And I analyzed school documents. So 6 school documents, which are not published, but they're basically school reports, projects, etc. And as usual, the answer to my research question is quite complex. It is not either good or bad, but rather there's been a mixed reactions to the school. A few parents are extremely engaged by the school and they love it, but most of them are not. Students, on the other hand, seem to love it in general. I must say at this point that one of the limitations of this study is that I was only able to interview parents who are actually actively engaged with the school, which makes sense. Those that are not supportive of the school, they were not interested in participating in this study. And of course, considering COVID-19 and subsequent policies and closures, I was not able to attend the school and observe and talk to parents themselves. So that was also a limitation, of course. So here I brought a few reactions that I got in the interviews. This is the first one by a student. And in this case, they said, we work the topic of the environment every day, only by walking into the school. We somehow talked about it in every subject. The topics of the environment and climate change are always present. So it seems to indicate that students enjoy the active pedagogy that happens in the school, learning by doing, as you can see in the picture, getting their hands dirty, but also mixing that with theory, which is what happens in the school. Everything that is worked with in the vegetable garden then is discussed in classrooms, either in biology, chemistry, physics, and so on. And another important aspect is that having sustainability as a cross-curricular priority is key in this kind of projects. That's what the literature shows. Another reaction, in this case by an educator, they said in 2016, 15% of families had organic vegetable gardens at home, whereas in 2019, 80% of them did. So that is actually a very promising indicator that some policies and practices that happen in the school are reaching the families and the broader communities. And that is one of the main objectives of this type of project. And the last reaction I want to share is by a parent, in which they say, unfortunately, the building has not been exploited to its fullest. And this was one of the overarching feelings in most interviews. And it is not easy to explain why. And before I go into that, I think it's important we talk a bit about how learning and teaching happens in the school. And then I'll go into why some people feel that it's not being exploited at its fullest. So the school, as I mentioned before, works a lot with the vegetable garden. So they plant, they collect, they exchange seeds. They use the produce in the school canteen. They've done projects with native plants. They've classified them using QR codes and so on. Now they're planning to study migratory birds with sister schools in Argentina and Chile, for instance. So this type of education is defined by Leininen, an author, as transformative education for sustainability. And it means that it promotes learning processes that change how we see the relationship between human beings, nature, and well-being. And they challenge how we see economy and politics in our daily lives. So one of the key objectives of this type of education is to try to harmonize the natural environment with communities that lead sustainable lifestyles. So based on this definition, what I did is I identified different enablers and barriers in the school. So this is part of the main findings of this study. This is a simplified summary of a larger and slightly more complex table. But these are some of the main ones. I'll start with the barriers. The school have faced several challenges, and the main ones have been the lack of engagement by the community and lack of support by authorities, mostly in terms of maintenance and staffing, which is number 3. Basically, they've only had one head teacher and one teacher in the school since 2016. The rest of the team has changed on a yearly basis, and that responds to the fact that the school is a rural school, considered a rural school in Uruguay, and they basically they depend on student intake in order to have a set number of teachers. In the case of the school, the student intake has been growing consistently throughout the years. However, they've still had changes in teachers and number of teachers and etc. And as you can imagine, in a small team like this one, it's only 4 educators that interact with kids on a daily basis. If 1 or 2 educators are new to the project or are not on board with the project, that can definitely limit the scope of what it's trying to be done. And it can create tensions within the team as well, which has happened. In terms of enablers, I would like to mention first the committed professionals, so the head teacher and what I call the motivated teacher. So they've been the 2 pillars of this project, and throughout the interviews they were mentioned as key for anything that's been done in the school. Also the external experts, both people from Tagma and the vegetable garden expert, they have been fundamental in terms of training the team, supporting and maintenance at the school. I did not mention this, but the authorities have not trained the team at all. The authorities basically handed the school building, and the team had to work with it. And last but not least, of course, the unique building and having sustainability as a cross-curricular priority are definitely enablers for this type of education. So coming back to what I said today, these barriers are the main reasons why many of the parents feel that the building has not been exploited yet, because of the different challenges they've been facing since its inception. So to conclude, I would firstly like to say that only having a sustainable or a green building is not enough for a climate change education school project to fulfill the goals that it has, which as you have seen, they are very ambitious. Projects like these depend on proactive support from the community and authorities, even before starting, which was not the case actually in the school. And they can be the defining enablers or barriers for this kind of project. And there is still a lot we do not know about climate change education, in terms of provision, in terms of evaluation, in terms of monitoring. But projects like these certainly come closer to transformative education that try to tackle climate change. So yeah, thank you very much for your time. Here's my email address in case you wanted to read the dissertation. I'm submitting it in a few days, so I can send you a copy. And I'm also sharing Tagma's website, where you can learn more about the projects they're also doing in Ecuador, Peru, Colombia, and Argentina right now. Yeah, thank you for your time.
Fantastic.